Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Unbreakable podcast. We're glad to have you back with this new episode that we're endeavoring to record and do. Hopefully, it'll come out okay. We are coming to you from our little humble abode. And for those of you watching on YouTube, hello to you as well. We are glad to have you with us for the Unbreakable podcast. We'll give you the opportunity to like and subscribe to the YouTube channel and our other social platforms, either in the middle or at the end of this podcast, or both. We'll just have to decide as we go. It'll be fun. We came to you the last podcast, and we talked to you and gave you our story, right? We gave our story about why you should even think about listening to us. Hopefully that gave you reason to actually listen to us. If not, you're probably not here anyway, and it's okay. So if you are here and you're listening to us, we plan to have some fun today, but we also want to really dive in a little bit into some keys that will help you in your parenting journey. So we want to talk with you about that. We want to thank you for being here. We want to thank you for supporting us. We want to thank you for subscribing and being a part of what we're doing here at Unbreakable. With that said, we can get started. I'm Brian. This is my wife, Leslie.
Hello.
Hello, she says. You can say it louder so we can actually record
Hello, how
it.
are you?
Yeah. We are not scripted per se, but we are outlined and directed. We want to be very unique and genuine with you. And we're not bringing to you stuff that we've learned out of a textbook, but things that we've learned from our own life. It's not theory.
Right. Yeah.
It's actually things that we've put into practice on our own 5 guinea pigs called our children.
I will say that we did read a lot of books.
Absolutely.
We talked in the first podcast about how we read a whole bunch of books before we got married. Well, when we had kids, we were just as serious. So we read a bunch of books and applied a bunch of principles, but we have worked them all out in our own life with our children.
Right.
And like Brian said, they were guinea pigs, but but they lived. It was great.
Yeah.
So I wanted to just kind of let you know who our kids are, who our children are. They are wonderful, awesome children. And I know we're their parents, but we really love them and we really are very proud of them. Hannah is our oldest daughter, and she is married to Chris, and they have 4 children now. And so we are grandparents and enjoying having that experience also. Hannah also is carrying on the tradition where she does podcasts and has blogs and different things where she talks about homeschooling and rearing children and homemaking and all that stuff. And she's very much cut out of Brian and I, and has her own little style to it, but is definitely a product of what we have poured into her. We have our second daughter, Megan, and she is an author.
Yes.
She writes Christian
fiction,
suspense fiction, and is just honing her craft, has books out there, but is really honing her craft and getting better and better as she keeps writing. And we are really excited to see what God does with that. And then we have Scott, and Scott is our
middle child.
Our middle child. He is our young man. And he is definitely just a lover of people. He's a lover of history. He's just a fun young man, and yet he is very serious about. He's working on getting his degree to be a children's pastor.
Right.
He's working full time in the process. He's just very serious about building a great life for himself and his future family.
And he has a business as well.
Yeah. So he's really on top of a lot of stuff and doing great. And then we have our next son, who is Matthew. And Matthew is overcoming autism.
Yeah.
And we say that because we truly believe that he is overcoming daily all the things that autism wants to throw at him. We are overcoming it by the power of the Lord and the power of the Holy Spirit. And so we keep encouraging Matthew and just working with him and watching him get better and better day by day. he is at home with us then, of course, because he is limited at this point.
Yeah.
And then our last
Let me
child.
jump in on Matthew. He's also very, not just autistic, but artistic.
Yes.
He is very creative, very smart. We have drawings. We have people who are now purchasing his sketches and his drawings because he is so gifted and so talented. So there's an amazing story that goes along with Matthew in regards to that. I just don't want to leave that out with his life.
No, that's right. Yeah. No, we're very impressed and amazed sometimes at what he can do. And then our last child is Abby, and she is 19. She's the baby. She's pulling up the rear. She was our most challenging child, but she is a wonderful, wonderful young lady, and just a powerhouse in the spirit. And she is entering her adult life, working and beginning to save up money and do things like that. And so she's just headed up her path. She hasn't quite decided exactly what the path is yet, but she's working on it. So we are very, very proud of our children, and they have worked very hard, as well as we have worked very hard to get to the point where we are. And we all serve the Lord together. We all are pursuing God's presence and what He has for us and His destiny and calling for us.
Right.
So we're really excited about what our kids are up to and how they're displaying what they've learned throughout their childhood as adults now. So.
Yeah, and so that's a quick highlight of our 5. I want to, before we get into the keys to parenting, explain to you just a little bit of background. I know you heard our story, our love story, and who we are and what we do. But I just want to do a quick drop back about 20 plus years ago, 22, 23 years ago. And before we had our Abby, we only had 4 children at the time. And what the directive God gave us and why that has driven us through the last 30 or 20 plus years, over 30 years of our marriage, but 20 plus years of parenting and marriage, that God gave us a specific directive for our family.
Yeah.
And we've applied that, and we've watched that work, and that's why now we want to share those things with you, so you can apply them as God shows you how to apply them for your life, for your marriage, and for your children. We're going to key in on parenting today, but we'll also talk about marriage in further later podcasts and things like that, because Unbreakable is all about marriage, and it's all about family. The family cannot be unbreakable if the marriage is breakable.
Right.
So the marriage has to be unbreakable to keep the family unbreakable.
Yes.
Anyway, back to what I was saying. I tend to rabbit trail, so apologize for that. Anyway, here we go. 20 plus years ago, we were at a church service, and we had someone who invited us to the service, and we went, and the guest speaker was praying for people and ministering to them, calling them out and speaking prophetically over their lives. So he had already spoken prophetically over Hannah, our oldest one's life, earlier in the service, and then he called my wife and I out, called Leslie and I out, and said, come on down. So we came down, so we walked up to him. He looked at us, goes, do you have children? And like I said, we had 4 at the time. He's like, yeah. I go, they here? I said, yeah. And so he has to bring all our children down to us. And so Matthew was a baby. He's still being held. So he was little. So it's over 20 years ago. And anyway, he began to prophesy to us, and I can hear it in my head just like it was yesterday. And he tells us to look at our children, which we did with great joy. And he's like, looks at Leslie and says, you have a proud mama's heart. And he looked at me and said, you have a proud daddy's heart. He goes, and you're supposed to. And he looked at us and said, look at me. And we did. And he said, look at your children again. And we did. And he's like, this is your ministry. These children are your ministry. You will pastor, you will teach, you will do all the things that you're going to do in the church, but they are your ministry. And there will come a time when people will listen to you because of them. Not because of you, not because of anything else, but because of them. People will begin to look at your children and want to know how and why they act like they do. Now that's really important, because most people think of preacher's kids, and I'm a pastor. Most PKs are labeled as miserable, horrible people.
I was a PK.
She wasn't that person. She was not. She was goody two shoe, and she hates that term. But she was a good person. I was not a PK. I was not a good person. So just whole different animal, another podcast. Anyway, right. So we are doing all this, and we're looking at him and listening to him. So that was, we were probably in our late 20s, early 30s.
Yeah.
At that point.
Mm-hmm.
And so fast forward to in our early 40s, and so early to mid 40s, and all of a sudden we'd go places and do things, and people would be going, how did you get your children to behave so well? Well, and we began to have encounters
Mm-hmm.
with total strangers in
Yeah.
restaurants and stores,
Mm-hmm.
wherever we went, and all of a sudden that prophecy began to become true.
Yeah.
And so over the last 10 plus years, we have had people who have actually asked us to share with them the principles and the things that we know and how to apply them to their lives, because they want to raise their children and have them turn out like our children. Sounds like bragging. It's really not.
What I want to say
Go
there
ahead.
is that it's only the grace of God
Absolutely right.
and Him teaching us
Yes.
what to do that we were able to teach them what to do. So
Yeah.
God needs to get all the glory for that. That's not really something we've contrived or come up with, because we're not that smart. And we're not, but He is. But God
Yeah.
is. God
Yeah.
is that smart, and so it's His grace that's
Yeah.
causing that to flow through us to them. So.
Yeah, and also we don't want to come off as like we've done everything perfect, because we have not. I've jokingly teased with all my children, said, for all the things that I've done wrong, I will pay for the first 6 months of your therapy. It's a joke at our house. Until I found out some things Leslie did, I'm like, oh, she's paying because she's the one that caused it. Joking. So
Not that I did everything right either, but I didn't
No.
cause them to have therapy needs,
We
so
were-
it's okay.
we were imperfect people applying perfect principles.
Yeah.
And so we know that sometimes when we share things that we share, people are like, well, you just, no, we made mistakes along the way. We know you're going to make mistakes along the way.
Sure.
But if you take the principles that God's given us, actually He's given to everybody.
Sure.
He just taught us some things with the principles that He laid out in Scripture
Mhm.
that we applied very overtly and very conscientiously and very purposefully.
Mhm.
When you do that, you can have the exact same results, if not better results,
Yeah.
than what we've had in our lives with our children.
Sure.
So I just want to give you that little bit of a background today, because we're going to talk to you about 3 keys to parenting. And so we want to just to look at these 3 points that we have for you today and develop them just a little bit, lean into them just a little bit, and open that up. And so I'm going to just let Leslie start off with the 3 keys to parenting, and I'm going to let her, because in all honesty, she did more of the parenting than I did, because I was out of the home working, pastoring, doing all things that I did outside of the home. So she was the home with the children, and we homeschooled all our children from the time they started school till the time they graduated school. So she was literally with them 24/7, where I would be in and out. Had a lot of interaction with my children, but really the keys to parenting, I know, but she really had to apply them on a daily basis more so than I did. So with that said, I'm going to let Leslie take the lead here.
So, you mentioned that we homeschooled,
Yeah.
and so in our homeschool, I was the teacher, but he was the principal. And so everything that was going on in our homeschool, I was actually going through him and running it by him and making sure that he understood what we were up to and was that okay, and how did he see it, and so we were definitely both having input on the parenting. He feels like he wasn't there as much, but he definitely had the overtone to it, so that they knew if I was saying it, Dad was supporting it, and that's how they would receive it then.
Yes.
So there are lots and lots of keys to parenting. These are just 3 that we've chosen today that are really important, and so we want to express them to you and hopefully give you creative thought on how to apply them in your home. The first one I want to talk about is guarding your children's ear gates and eye gates. In case you don't know, every person has a place. They have several places in their spirit that the enemy can get entrance to you. Now, if you keep those things closed off to him, he can't get any entrance to you.
Right.
Because as a child of God, you have the Lord who's protecting you, and the only way the enemy gets in is if you allow him in. So what we felt was very important with our children was that we wanted to watch what they were watching and what they were hearing very closely. We did we had guidelines for videos that they watched or TV shows that they watched. And if they did not match the guidelines that we laid down from our beliefs in how God wanted us to behave, or how he wanted us to speak, or how he wanted us to live our lives, if those guidelines weren't met, then we didn't watch those shows. We didn't say, well, it'll be okay, and just kind of hope they didn't get the bad part of that.
Right.
No, if there were bad parts in it, then we didn't watch that show. And we tried we were very, very particular about what were okay things to watch and what were not. Every once in a while, if they were watching like a television show that we normally watch, they would throw in a topic that we didn't care for or that we weren't in support of. And so that particular show they did not watch because it did not line up with what God gave us as guidelines. Now, those guidelines can be anything from obey your parents, to love one another, to be kind and merciful and have loving kindness towards one another, forgive one another. There's all kinds of just basics in the epistles that I kind of used as our standards of behavior that, if you read through those epistles, you're going to see how the saints of old, how they decided that this is what God was saying. This is what he wants you to do, how he wants you to behave. And so we laid our children's guidelines down that way. So those guidelines applied to watching things. It applied to the music they listened to. It applied to the books they read. And it applied to any games they were playing. When our kids were growing up, they were just getting into video game kind of things. And so they didn't have too many that were, a problem. But it applies to everything. If it's going in your eyes and if it's going in your ears, then you want to be careful what that is. You want to pay attention to what they're listening to and what they're seeing, what they're participating in, because it's opening doors in their spirit if you're allowing them to watch things or see things. And children's stuff is chock full of demonic things and witchcraft and magic and enchantment and all this stuff that is not godly. And so you want to be careful what you're allowing your kids to be exposed to.
Yeah, and I'm gonna jump in here, and I'm gonna tell you one, because again, we didn't do it perfectly. We just were very conscientious about how to do this. So I'm going to tell you a story that happened in our life. Then I'm going to tell you a story that happened, not part of our kids, but to me when I was youth pastoring a gazillion years ago, that has to deal with ear gates and eye gates. So anyway, like we said, we watched carefully. We paid attention to what they were listening to, what they were watching. And she gave a list of all sorts of really, I wouldn't let my kid do witchcraft. I wouldn't let my kid do it. True. Maybe. I hope. I hope that's the truth in your case. However, there are other more subtle things that come in. For example, our children were watching, when they were little, a particular cartoon on TV that we approved of, that we were good with. But then they started developing the character between two of the characters in this cartoon, the siblings, and they made them antagonistic to each other. And they created a sibling rivalry between the siblings in this cartoon. And our kids were watching this every, it was a daily cartoon. And so they're watching this all the time, and it's coming in their ears and it's coming in their eyes. And we were overlooking all that. We didn't like sit over them and take notes and hover over everything that they did. That's not what we're talking about. Excuse me. But we're watching this on a regular basis, and all of a sudden that subtle antagonism began to rear its head and show up in the relationship between our children. And our children began to have that issue. And at first we're like, where did this come from? What in the world happened here? Because they were fine up to that point. There was not a sibling rivalry. There was not antagonism. They got along great. Our kids, and they still are, even as adults, they are their own best friends. And they were then. So it was out of the pattern for their life to have this antagonism and this snarkiness between the two of them, between two particular children. And so Leslie began to look at what they're watching and listening to again, and she caught what they're doing on this particular cartoon kids show. animated kids show, I guess would be the better way to put it, or we went a cartoon, just animated kids show. So that show went to the wayside.
Yep.
Because we're not
No more
going
of that
to
one.
we're not going to let that influence be there, because it's your job, it's our job to be the influence of our children as they're being raised. It's
Right.
not the school's job, it's not the government's job. I know this is radical. It's our job. It's the job of mom and dad. Now, I told you I'd tell you a story from way back. This is 30 plus years ago. I was speaking at a youth ministry, and I was talking about this very topic, about what goes in your ears and what goes in your eyes, and how to protect yourself from the things that the world brings that can harm you, that can cause issues in your own mind, can cause mental health issues, and all these things, paranoia, panic, fear. And I was specifically talking about fear in that particular evening. And one of the kids in that room, young lady, she raised her hand and says, well, I watch horror movies all the time, and they don't affect me at all. And I didn't argue with this young teenage girl at the time. I didn't. I was like, well, good for you. You're the exception to the rule, and so good for you. So fast forward, we finish the service, we finish praying for kids, we get done for the evening, and I lived in a town about 30, 40 minutes away. Went out to my car to leave and realized I'm not going to make it home. I need to use the restroom. So I went in to use the restroom. No one saw me come back in. Don't get ahead of me. So I go into the restroom, I use the restroom, wash hands, clean up, and I come out. And when you come out of in that particular church where the men's and women's restroom were, there was a water fountain between them. And so I walked out of the men's restroom, and this girl was getting a drink of water. Nothing unusual yet, right? And so I just simply said, I'm next, meaning I want a drink of water. Well, she freaks out. She screams, she yells. She didn't even look to see who said that. She runs out of the building and goes and leans on the car she's going to be going away in a few minutes go home and with her friends and family. And I start laughing because she's the one who told me that what she had put in her ears, what she put in her eyes, had not had any effect in her life. And so I got my drink of water, got myself together, walked outside, and she looked at me and goes, that scared the daylights out of me. I looked at her and said, yeah, I noticed that. I said, I'm glad that those movies don't affect you at all. And laughed. Her youth pastor laughed. I got out of my car and went home. It matters.
It does.
What you put in your ear and what you put in your eyes matters. So guard your children's ear and eye gates. That's point number one. Point number two.
Point number two is to raise them with the end goal in mind. What I mean by that is everything that we had an opportunity to participate in, Brian and I needed to consider and pray about, okay, is that leading our kids in the direction they need to go? Because when we had our children, we began praying for them, that the Lord would open up his pathway for them, that we would know how to lead them down the right pathway to their destiny, to their calling in life. And so every time there was a club or a sport or a play opportunity or a choir or just anything that's extracurricular, even friendships, we needed to pray over them just to say, now Lord, is this a good opportunity for them, or is this one that's going to take them in a wrong direction? Not that we were like spending hours doing that, just taking time to consider it together with the Lord and say, okay, now there were a couple times where there was a group opportunity and we were thinking that we would go ahead and do that, and yet when it got time to go and do that, it was just like, it just felt wrong. It didn't feel like we were supposed to participate in that. And so we would, I would back us out of that and say, I think we're going to not do that this time. Or sometimes it was just that it wasn't the right timing for it. Like we wanted to start in a club when Scott was real young, but it just didn't jive. We tried and it just didn't work. But later down the road, he was much more equipped and ready to be in a club with other young boys and,
Yeah.
and doing something. And so it worked better at that point. It was just timing. It wasn't necessarily that it wasn't a good thing.
Right.
It just needed to be in the right timing for his life. All of your children are growing and learning and maturing at different rates, and sometimes it's just not right at the stage they're in. You know,
Yeah.
even if it's something you want them to do, it's not right. We did that with piano lessons. I play piano, and I wanted my children to play piano, have music education, and we were going to do it through piano. And we started a couple of them, but they really weren't ready or interested. And so I pulled off, and I waited, and it really took them till they were much older, and suddenly they were very interested in it.
Yeah.
And once their interest hit, and once they felt the need to have that in their life because they wanted to do some other things musically, then there was an open door and we were able to pursue that. And
Absolutely.
so we just always considered, what is the end goal, and is this really going to benefit them in their life, or is it something that's just an extra? And sometimes it's okay to have an extra,
Yep.
as long as you get an okay from the Lord about it. So,
Yeah.
anything to add to that?
I do, but from a different perspective. When we talk about raising with the end goal in mind, from day one, and Leslie and I had this conversation before we even had babies, when we were thinking about having babies, and I was like, we're not raising children, we're raising adults to be. And so, like when they were little, just a practical thing, we didn't talk baby talk to our children.
Right.
We didn't do the goo goo gaga thing. As when we spoke to them, we spoke English like we would talk to our friends. We talked in a manner that if we were talking to each other, because the babies, the toddlers, as they're growing up, going into out, they're going to mess it up on their own. I don't have to help them and work with them. They're going to make words come out funny. They're going to you're not going to miss out on childhood. In other words, they're still going to be children. But my goal is not to raise children. My goal is to raise functioning, godly adults.
Right.
So the end goal is always kept in mind.
Right.
So the things that we do with them on the practical level, the academic level, and the spiritual level, and the relationship level are always with the idea in mind that I'm not raising someone to be 3 forever.
Right.
I'm raising someone to be 30 and 40 and 50 and 60 years old, and to understand principles, understand relationship, understand. And now, I'm not saying take a 3-year-old and take them through things that they don't need to know until they're 20.
Right.
But it's age specific and age appropriate.
Yeah.
But each age, the thing we have in mind as parents is, I have a goal in mind to have them successfully become an adult, and not be locked up in fear, anxiety, have the mom and dad issues that a lot of young adults have when they get there, but have the ability to step out, become who God's called them to be, step into the plans and destinies that God has for them. That's another thing we did too, is prayed over each of our children, like, okay, Lord, what's your plan for them?
Yeah.
We didn't impose our plan for them.
Right.
We asked God for His plan for them, and then taught them to pray the same way. When our kids got old enough to start going to college and begin to work, they would come to us, and especially to me, and like, hey, Dad, what about blah, blah, blah? Can I do blah, blah, blah? And I'm like, well, have you prayed about that? Have you asked God, what do you want you to do? I know you like this. I know you like that. But is that really what God wants you to do?
Right.
If it is, great. If it's not, then you need to find a way to get in the plan that God has for your life. And each of them have started one way, and each of them have adapted or changed. Some have not changed very much, just a little small adjustments. Others have been big changes. For example, our Scott, he wanted to go into law enforcement since he was 3. He loved Texas. A Walker Texas Ranger
was his favorite.
Oh my gosh. We've watched every episode of that thing about 150,000 times. And we know the songs, we know the characters. The show will come on now as an adult, and he'll like, oh, this is the one where I'm like, yeah, we know. And so anyway, it's forever. He wanted to go into law enforcement forever. And then when he got to the age that he could, and he looked into it, and we looked into it with him, the Lord moved on his heart when he went to Bible college, and moved on his heart to become a children's pastor instead. It's not that he doesn't like law enforcement, not that he doesn't like military. He loves all of that.
Yeah.
But God had a different plan.
Yeah.
And so because we taught him how to pray and hear God's voice with the end result in mind,
Right.
that helped him make a quality decision to follow God's plan for his life.
Right.
Anything else to add in point number 2?
Nope.
All right.
Nope. The last thing we want to point out is this key is even, it's a biblical key.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because in the Bible, in Proverbs, it says wisdom is the main thing.
Yep.
So in all you're getting, get wisdom. So what I'm trying to say there is that as a parent, every situation that comes up with your children, just send up a prayer and, Lord, what is the wisdom for this situation? Yeah. What is it that I need to know? Reveal to me what your wisdom is for this. How do I answer this? You need to be so reliant on the Lord that you're constantly turning to him and saying, okay, what about this? I need wisdom. I need wisdom. The good thing is that Jesus, it says in the New Testament, has been made wisdom unto us. So when we are carrying Jesus in our life, in our heart, and his Holy Spirit in our life, and in our heart, then we are able to gain that wisdom quickly. We're able to just call on it, to just draw on it, because it's already there for us. It's already been made available to us. The Bible in the New Testament says that we have been given the mind of Christ, so we can think like he thinks, and we can feel the things that he feels because we have that mind, that soul that's like his. So always, in all situations, ask for wisdom.
Yep.
Ask for wisdom, whether it's a small thing or whether you feel like it's a huge thing.
Yeah.
Ask for wisdom because God knows how to get you through it to the other side of it. You got something you want to throw in on that?
I would just say, to find wisdom, you have to habitually pray.
Yeah.
It has to become a habit,
Mm-hmm.
and it's wisdom on all my decisions. I should back that up. Not every decision, not whether I should get that can of peas or that can of peas. I'm not trying to get weird, but all my decisions. Should I do this? Should I work here? Should I have this conversation with this person? Should I change jobs? Should I? All the things that matter in life, I need to pray over and get wisdom. Yeah. I've never taken a job. I've never taken on new priorities or responsibilities in a job. Mm-hmm. I've never taken on different things for my family without praying about that and getting wisdom. I know the last church position that I held, they offered me the position, and I wanted it, and I thought it was the right thing to do, but I didn't just jump on it. I looked at it and said, can I have 3 days to pray? And they're like, we expected that answer, and that's one of the reasons we're offering you the position. We want you to have this position because you're a praying person. Because I wanted to make sure, because it was a good thing, but we wanted to make sure it was a God thing. Yeah. And so I would say this, not every good thing is a God thing. And I've been saying that for decades.
Right.
But every God thing is a good thing.
Sure.
It's a simple little paradigm shift, but it matters. Yeah. And that's where wisdom comes from. If you're habitually praying and habitually talking to the Lord, habitually listening to the Lord, you will have the wisdom that you need every day and on the decision process that you're going through, whatever that decision process may be.
Yeah. I think a lot of times that wisdom comes into play with your kids, with your children, not always just because you're trying to pray over them for them, but sometimes you need to pray with them. Sometimes their situation is something they need to gain wisdom on. Bingo. And so you need to pray with them so that they can hear the Lord themselves and hear the wisdom on which direction to go, which thing to do or not do, which friend to have or not have. There are some times in life where the people that your children are beginning to interact with are really not going to be good for them. They are toxic. They are, and I don't have anything against those other children. It's just for my children, they didn't jive well. It wasn't going to lead them in good directions to have friends with those children. So you need the wisdom, and they need the wisdom. They need to be able to see what the wisdom is also. So take them to prayer. Go together in prayer and seek the Lord and say, Lord, give us wisdom for this situation. Show us who is a good friend, who is not. What is the answer to this situation? The Lord will reveal all those things. He will show you what you need to know, and show your children what they need to know, and then you can make wise decisions about your life and about their lives.
Absolutely. So that's really the 3 keys today. So the teacher in me wants to just recap, so we're going to do that. Number 1, you're going to guard your children's eyes and ears until
Yes.
they learn how to guard them for themselves.
Yes.
And even then, you're going to pay attention.
Mm-hmm.
Number 2, you're going to raise them with the end goal in mind.
Yeah.
That you're raising children into adulthood.
Yeah.
You're raising children who don't know God into knowing God,
Mm-hmm.
and becoming godly people.
Mm-hmm.
Number 3, you're going to pray for wisdom. Oh my goodness, you're going to pray,
Yeah.
pray. And wisdom is the main thing.
It is.
And not only that, you can tie that with number 2. You're going to teach them how to become responsible, how to hear God,
Mm-hmm.
and have wisdom in their own life.
Yes.
And then don't be surprised if they surpass you and their wisdom goes beyond yours. And be willing to allow that.
Mm-hmm.
That's good. So with that said, we just want to wrap up. Thank you again for being here on the Unbreakable podcast with
Yes.
us. For those of you watching on YouTube, you'll see in the comment section underneath, in the information section, all the places you can connect with us.
Yeah.
Do the like, share, subscribe thing, please. Those of you on the podcast, please like it, share it. Let us know. Put in the comments the things that you find helpful,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe even some things that you would like for us to share as we move forward in this ministry of helping you keep your marriage and your family unbreakable. So with that said, we'll talk to you soon, and we wish you well, and we are praying for you, literally praying for you every week for you and your family, because we're expecting God to give you the best that you would not just deserve, but that He has for you. It's better than what you deserve. It's a bigger plan.
Amen.
So with that said, God bless you, and we will talk to you again soon.